收看国际辩论社第31集的播出。在台湾总统大选和立法院选举之后，美国国会台湾连线小组共同主席、民主党众议员 Amy Barra， 还有共和党的众议员 Mario Diaz-Balart 随即率团抵达台湾，并且是展开了为期3天的访问。国际辩论社独家专访到了跨党派的共同主席，深入探讨美中台的新政局。Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to 国际辩论社 Let's Talk 观点好谈. Today, we have the great honor of hosting two distinguished guests who plays a crucial role in promoting and also strengthening the U.S.-Taiwan relations. Now, joining us are the Congressman Mario Diaz-Balart and also Congressman Amy Barra, who both are the co-chair of the Congressional Taiwan Caucus, who is the largest bipartisan caucus in the U.S. House of Representatives. Well, we know that the Congressional Taiwan Caucus has been the forefront in advocating for Taiwan-related issues in the Congress. And we know that by emphasizing this, they also have been encompassing the also diplomatic and also economic as well as the security dynamics. So today, we have the opportunity to delve into their recent visit in Taiwan and also their activities in the caucus. So first of all, I'd like to welcome both of you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. What a pleasure.
Glad to be here.
First of all, I'd like to ask our Congressman Barra about what's your primary visit in this trip to Taiwan?
You know, I think in a bipartisan way, the United States Congress has always been the leader in support of the United States and Taiwan relations. And we just saw a historic election just a little over a week ago where a show of democracy here on the island of Taiwan, electing the next president. And we thought it was important for us as the co-chairs of the Taiwan caucus, but also as a Democrat and a Republican, to come congratulate the president-elect, Dr. Lai, as well as also have a chance to meet with the current president, President Tai.
That's fabulous. So like we just talked about, it's bipartisan support from this Congressional Taiwan Caucus. Can you tell our audience, what's the main purpose of this caucus?
Well, it's interesting what my colleagues have said. The relationship between the United States and Taiwan has been a very strong one for years, but it's really cemented by the Congress of the United States. And that support for Taiwan continues. And it continues not only extremely strongly, but also in a bipartisan way, which is why we wanted to make sure that everybody understands that while we have differences and while we have huge debates in Congress of the United States, the support for Taiwan, for Taiwan's democracy, for the freedom and the prosperity of the Taiwanese people, that transcends our differences, that transcends any partisan divides. It is firmly rooted in the United States Congress, and that's still there. It is still there. And so we've had a number of really interesting meetings. And this is a busy time in Congress right now. We're doing the budget, the appropriations process. But as my colleague said, the election just took place here in Taiwan, and we felt it was important to let the world and the Taiwanese people know that while we might have differences in the United States Congress, the support for Taiwan and the admiration, right, for the Taiwanese people is as solid as ever before.
And I would just add, this is 2024. It's the 45th anniversary of the Taiwan Relations Act, which was a historic piece of legislation that the United States Congress passed with the foundational principle that the future of Taiwan is up to the people of Taiwan. And I think by our coming in, I think you'll see additional congressional delegations and high-level visits. It's to reiterate that foundational principle, that Taiwan's future is up to the people of Taiwan.
Correct.
Definitely. We can see that action speaks really louder than words, and both of you have been so much in putting this action. And we know that the Congressional Taiwan Caucus has been passing a lot of bills related, to Taiwan's relations as well. So what are those really substantive assistance that this caucus has been providing to Taiwan?
Well, you want to talk about some of the economic issues first. For example, we hope we'll have good news, some additional good news, and some legislation that will be very beneficial not only for Taiwan but also for the United States, like the double taxation.
Absolutely.
Do you want to talk about that?
Sure. I mean, if you've watched in recent weeks, the committees on the House of Representatives have really advanced the addressing the double taxation issue, which, if we're able to resolve this, will really spur investment in the United States from Taiwan, but also will be good for Taiwan's economy. I can't predict the future. This is the United States Congress, but my expectation is in a bipartisan way. You saw a strong vote out of the committee, Democrats and Republicans, House and Senate. Hopefully this is something we can get done fairly quickly. In addition, we in the Taiwan caucus have been pushing for increased trade, reducing barriers to trade, and increased economic cooperation, again, because we think it's important. Taiwan's the world's leader in semiconductors, super important to the most advanced electronics in the world. And we've got to make sure, Taiwan continues to do that, but that we have great supply chains to make sure we can keep doing that.
There's also, for example, the House passed, and it's now in negotiations, but for the first time ever, we have money, for example, for FMF, foreign military financing for Taiwan. And it just really kind of shows you the level of trust that the United States Congress has for Taiwan and the level of support. And by the way, we also have seen these constantly and frankly more frequent and more aggressive posture from the Communist Party of China, something that should worry us all. It does clearly worry the United States Congress. But once again, Taiwan continues to move forward. And if I may kind of steal one of your lines, which Please. I've done quite a few times today, right, is you keep hearing about any changes of the status quo. And the reality is that the United States has not changed its posture. Taiwan has not changed its posture. The Communist Party of China has changed its posture in a more aggressive way, in a much more negative way. And so I think it's important to point that out, that there is one entity here who's being aggressive, who's being, I would rather say, even dangerous. And that's mainland China. That's not Taiwan, and that's not the United States.
As you just pointed out, that no one's changing the status quo, not the United States, not Taiwan, but possibly China. So we'd like to talk about, post-elections, of Taiwanese election, we see more like military provocations from China. So what's your take on this?
My sense is, going back to this, the status quo has been peaceful and prosperous for all the countries in the region, Taiwan, but for one country more than any other, that's been China. So there's no reason for China to change that status quo. We want China to be a responsible player. But of course, we're seeing increased military actions, provocations. We see it in the South China Sea. That forces the United States to step up along with other allied, like-valued nations, but also to work with Taiwan. The goal here is deterrence, to maintain the status quo of peace and prosperity. But given aggressive actions by Beijing, I think we were forced to have to respond and work with our partners.
Yeah. And what we said at the beginning, what was said at the beginning of this interview, the goal here is, look, it's up to the Taiwanese people to determine who leads them and what avenues they pursue and which way they go. And that's the issue. Nobody here is trying to, change, dissuade, pressure. The United States clearly isn't trying to pressure. It's up to Taiwanese to decide their future. And they've done so, once again, in a transparent election. And it's something that we should all celebrate. And it's really interesting that what you saw after those elections, so many countries congratulated Taiwan in that election. And I think that's something that the Communist Party of China fears. They fear Taiwan. They see it as a threat because it is such an example and a contrast to the repression and the oppression within China or Hong Kong, right? And so, but again, that's why look, we're happy to be here. We're thrilled to be here with the message of just solidarity, of support, and of admiration for, again, another clean, transparent election.
Well, Taiwan truly appreciate the solidarity that the United States has been providing to Taiwanese people, but also at the same time, we've been facing solid diplomatic oppressions and also the economic pressures from China. So what do you think about how Taiwanese people how to deal with this pressure that we're facing?
I think that's why it's important to continue to work together on the economic side to make sure Taiwan continues to have such a strong economy, to address those economic issues. You heard presidential candidates talk about that. That's where if we can reduce trade barriers, if we can address the double taxation issue, I think those are all good things for Taiwan. They're certainly good things for the United States as well. But then I think it's important to say to the people of Taiwan, regardless of what you may hear messaging-wise out of Beijing, the people of the United States stand with you and stand firmly that the future of Taiwan is up to the people of Taiwan. And you'll hear me say that over and over again. That is a foundational principle that we all believe.
We also know that, China has been consistently criticizing of U.S. representative congressional members visiting to Taiwan. So how do you both perceive China's discontent on the actions?
They do this. That's who they are. It's the nature of the beast that it is, which they try to bully and to pressure and to threaten. And the reality is, and they do that, even to members. They try to do that even to members of the Congress. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. I do think, however, by the way, that it's important to however, have a very strong deterrence, and that means strength. And so it is important that Taiwan, and you're seeing it stepping up in its own defense, because the best way to avoid conflict and to avoid war, when you're dealing with a thug, a bully, is to be strong. And so we're very pleased that we see that Taiwan is also stepping up there. The Taiwanese people are stepping up to make sure that their defense, in order to avoid war, is as strong as possible.
Well, about the defense, I'd like to talk about what we just mentioned about the status quo. If China continues to change the status quo, will the U.S. be also changing the status quo as well?
Well, again, from our end, I think because of China's aggressive behavior, it is forcing the United States and others to take actions, to have to patrol the South China Sea, to make sure these are open, navigated waterways for maritime security, for freedom of navigation. The straits are international waterways, so important to the free movement of goods and services. I think that's very important. Again, I think the message here is China's posture and behavior isn't what a great nation does in the 21st century. It's not helpful to the prosperity of the people of this region or the people of the world for that matter. You look at the aggression in the South China Sea. The Philippines has their own exclusive economic zone. Vietnam has their own exclusive economic zone. Everyone should be able to do what they want to do within their own territories and their maritime territories. China's changing that status quo, which is forcing everyone, not just the United States, but you see Europe, you see Australia, you see Japan and others. And the goal here isn't confrontation. The goal here is we had a context of stability that was prosperous for every nation, including China. Why would we change that? Why wouldn't we in the 21st century want to live in a peaceful, prosperous world for everyone?
And now back to the Taiwan's current situation. We know that the ruling party once again won the most recent election, but also the majority of parliament, they lost that. So what's your advice on the ruling party, especially now it's a cross-party collaboration in the future?
Yeah. Well, I don't think we it's not up to us to kind of suggest what they should do. I will tell you, however, what I think is crucial, and you see that in our case. And so while right now in the United States we have a divided government, right? We have the House controlled by one party, and then the Senate and the White House controlled by a different party, and so that is always challenging. But what you also see is when it comes to, for example, as I mentioned before, the relationship with Taiwan. There is no divide between Republicans and Democrats, and so I think it would be helpful that while the politics, the interior politics within Taiwan, which in democracies, right, they're heated and they're sometimes messy, but not to lose sight of the fundamental. And part of those fundamentals is the relationship between Taiwan and the United States. And fortunately, in the United States Congress, we have all been able to make sure that is not partisan, that remains bipartisan. And I would, without being presumptuous, I think that relationship between Taiwan and the United States has been so important. And so I would hope that regardless of any differences in, political differences within Taiwan, that there's that recognition that has served Taiwan well, it has served the United States, but actually it has served the entire world well to have that very special relationship.
Look, and I would say, the media, all of them comment on U.S. media, but perhaps it's true in Taiwanese media as well, sometimes focuses on the political differences. But truly, at the end of the day, you see Mario, a Republican, myself, a Democrat, we're close friends, and that is how it is in the majority of Congress. When we have to do something and we have to step up, there's not a hesitation. We've seen that with the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Strong bipartisan, stepping up to come to the defense of Ukraine. Nobody was looking for another war in the Middle East, but there was no hesitation in terms of sending assets and troops to make sure this was contained and didn't spread throughout the region. And the same thing, when you look at the supplemental bill that President Biden has sent to us, it has both funding for Ukraine, funding for the Middle East, but more importantly, it has funding for the Indo-Pacific. And the goal there is to make sure we don't have a third conflict. Again, this is to avoid war, not to provoke war.
Correct. And that's the key. That is the key. The issue, nobody wants conflict. Nobody wants war. Taiwan clearly doesn't want it. The United States doesn't want it. But the best way to make sure that we don't have it is to make sure that everybody is strong. And that there's no misunderstanding that there is weakness. Because thugs tend to take advantage of weakness.
And I would add, obviously, we're living in the United States in divided government, as you will be living here in Taiwan. We're making a point to visit with all of the parties while we're here, because I think it's important. As Congress and the legislators in Taiwan, we have to have that working relationship, because, again, that partnership, that long-term strategic planning, the resources, I think that dialogue is very important.
Yeah.
Indeed, I think the spirit of collaboration between the parties is something that Taiwanese politicians should be looking up to as well. And also, like you just mentioned about the war, I'd like to talk more about how when the United States actually facing some obstacles in supporting Ukraine and also Israel in their wars. So in the future, will there be any similar difficulties in supporting Taiwan military-wise?
I mean, my sense is the supplemental funding that has Ukraine, that has funding for the Middle East, that also has funding for the Indo-Pacific and Taiwan. I believe firmly that we will get that piece of legislation done. It is in the process of negotiation. Certainly we have some domestic challenges on our southern border that we have to resolve and come together. But truly, if you take the politics out of it, we've seen votes on the floor for that funding in a similar way. And it's over 350 votes, Democrats and Republicans. The majority of both our parties are very supportive.
And I think that's an interesting observation that he makes. There are a lot, like you see it in politics everywhere, there are a lot of different issues that come to play, right? But the issue of supporting Taiwan, that's not been a problem.
Right.
That has not been a problem. Actually, to his point, the issue the problem has frankly been some domestic issues. Not dealing with not international issues. Look, I think the United States and the people of the United States understand that the United States has an obligation to lead. But here's the point, and we've said it time and time again: it's not to impose. It's to try to make sure that Taiwan continues to be free, and it's up to the Taiwanese people to determine its future. Not somebody not a dictatorship that tries to impose its will. That happens to be close by Taiwan. And so, I don't, if we have issues with the funding, which we could have, because it's the democratic process, it's not because of the money from the Indo-Pacific. Maybe some other outside issues. I still think we're gonna be able to resolve those anyways.
I think we will as well.
Yeah.
Well, my next question goes about the United States' relationship with Europe. Of course, it's very crucial allies together, but also we can observe that now in Europe it's getting more conservative, it's more protectionism on the rise. So how do the United States make sure to be in this leadership position now going on?
Yeah, look, again, everybody has the right to elect their own people. And in Europe, you have long-standing democracies. And I think you have again, some internal issues that cause populations to decide how they want to vote. I think one of the issues that the American people are telling us is when it comes to, for example, our relationship with Europe, is we cherish that relationship, but Europe has to step up also in its defense. And for so many years, obviously, I think Europe has gotten a little bit complacent, right? Kind of knowing that the United States was going to step up and defend Europe, which it has done time and time again. The American people are now saying, hey, carry your own weight, which is why I am so gratified to see what has happened here in Taiwan, which is, and those are tough decisions to make, obviously politically, but the Taiwanese people are standing up. They're strengthening their defenses, their own domestic defense against any foreign adversary. The issues that were here the week when it's going from 4 months to 12 months for the military service. Those are tough decisions. But again, it's important that we all do our part. The United States, many in Europe in particular, have kind of been, fat and happy, hoping that the United States would always step in and protect them. And you're seeing that the United States is stepping up in the war efforts, for example, for Ukraine. But Europe has to do more, and it's starting to do more. And so, he mentioned, by the way, that you're seeing because of the aggressiveness of communist China, how in the region you're seeing countries like the Philippines and Japan, kind of standing up and saying we have to do more, we have to do better. I think that's good for everybody. As far as the protectionism, look, every country has the right to think about their national security interests and their economic interests first. But I think Taiwan serves a very special place in the global economy. It's a beacon of hope and of democracy. And so I am not concerned as long as we all continue to do our part.
And I would just say the relationship with Europe is strong as ever.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, many of our closest allies are in Europe, our Five Eyes partners and others. Vladimir Putin made a horrible mistake here. His unprovoked invasion of Ukraine has united Europe. It's strengthened NATO. The responsibility for European security, you're seeing the Europeans spend resources that I never would have expected them to spend in the defense of Europe, in the defense of Ukraine. Obviously, there's always politics that everyone has to work through, but that's nothing new. And so I think that context is incredibly important. And as Mario pointed out, I think Beijing, Xi Jinping's aggressive maneuvers here in Asia, in this region, has also woken up a Japan, a Korea, countries of the Southeast Asia that are not looking for conflict, just as Taiwan's not looking for conflict, just as the United States is not looking for conflict. But we do want a foundation of peace and prosperity, of freedom, where we can compete with one another, where we can compete with China. But we want to do it on fair terms, on terms where it's our own future, it's our own decisions, not someone imposing their decisions on another person.
Yeah.
And you mentioned, it doesn't surprise us. What they do, they try to pressure, as I mentioned before, they try to even, they'll send nasty emails to members of Congress. Oh yeah, we get them all the time, and it's kind of laughable.
How nasty?
Well, look, they don't work, because here we are, right? Right? Here we are, visiting. Yeah. I don't even know if they understand how absurd it sounds when they try to threaten, and I guess that's what they're used to doing to their own people, unfortunately. But it clearly doesn't work, for democracies around the world.
Look, to Chinese elected leaders and others, let's have dialogue. Let's talk about this. Let's do it in a respectful manner and so forth. I don't presume that I can dictate where Xi Jinping or other Chinese elected officials travel. I don't think they can tell us where we can travel, and certainly, so let's have a level of respect and dialogue for one another.
And also, of course, that the United States is the symbol of a democratic country, but there are occasional circumstances when the isolationism is on the rise. For example, we can see that Trump's recent proposal to impose tariffs on Taiwanese products And also we see that Biden has also mentioned enhancing the competitiveness of the American products. So what's your interpretation of this trend happening in the United States?
I think it's just everyone focuses in on their own economies, their own jobs, making sure their individuals have employment. I'm sure the Taiwanese government looks at Taiwanese industry and employment just as the Chinese government does. That's where we have to sit down and negotiate, and how we take down barriers to competition, but on a fair playing field. And I think that's some of the concerns that I think President Trump raised, and I certainly think you see in the Biden administration. It's got to be a fair playing field. It's got to be fair competition.
Absolutely.
And then I'm very confident in U.S. products, as I'm sure that Taiwanese companies are very confident in the products that they're producing, that on a fair competitive playing field, we're going to do fine.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, free societies produce wealth, they produce opportunity. Freedom is just the most precious gift that humans can have, and I think totalitarian regimes like the communist China, they fear the contrast of having Taiwan, so close. It's hard for them to be able to say that you have to have repression in order to do okay, and then you look just across the straits and you have this beacon of hope and of progress that is Taiwan. Yeah, look, freedom is always the right solution. It's always the right answer. And part of that, by the way, is the freedom of press, right? And we like to complain. All elected officials will complain about, the reporters, whatever. But without an aggressive free press, you can't have freedom. And that is another thing that is lacking in communist China. And again, it's great to see in Taiwan.
Well, thank you so much for sharing with us your insights. Both of your leadership positions in the Congressional Taiwan Caucus really truly emphasize the bipartisan commitment to fortify the bond between U.S. and Taiwan. So thank you so much, and we look forward to a better future together.
Thank you for taking the time.
Pleasure.
以哈冲突即将进入第5个月，随着以色列总理纳坦雅胡持续不愿和哈马斯签订停战协议，人质只能持续受哈马斯控制，让以色列的人质家属气不过，跑到了纳坦雅胡的家门口搭帐篷抗议。部分的人质家属更气得直接冲进国会殿堂，高举标语旗帜，拍桌大骂议员有够不要脸。而危机长期化，更让纳坦雅胡的支持率持续下降，激起民众高喊国会要改选。
以色列家属不忍了，冲进国会，对着议员拍桌痛骂。
אני מבין את הכאב שלכם, אני חלק מכם, אני מרגיש את זה, אני אומר לכם שנעשה הכל על מנת שהילדים, האחים, הנשים, שיחזרו הביתה ויחזרו בשלום.
讲完话，赶快溜，留下人质家属满脸涨红，失望哭泣。
ואתמול עולה ראש הממשלה ואומר לא תהיה עסקה. על הגב של מי לא תהיה עסקה? על הגב של שלי הוא רוצה שלא מתפטר.
家属会这么绝望，全是因为总理纳坦雅胡1月22号这番公开言论。
אבל שיהיה ברור.
Let it be clear, I utterly reject the Hamas monsters' capitulation terms.
אם נסכים לכך.
Were we to agree to this, our soldiers would have fallen in vain. Were we to agree to this, we would not be able to ensure the security of our citizens.
不愿接受哈马斯弹劾，等于战争会继续进行。隔天，发言人再度重申政府立场。
There will be no ceasefire that leaves the hostages in Gaza and Hamas in power. Beyond that, we have nothing to elaborate.
继续开火，等不到和平，不满以色列政府只为立场，却失了人性。
Citizens and governments have a contract between them. We serve the country, we send our children to serve the country, we pay taxes, and in exchange for all that, we expect that the government of the country protects us.
人质家属聚在总理家门外，高举照片、图片，想换回政府良知。眼见和平抗议未果，隔天民众到国会外高声呐喊，要求改选，反遭警方压制带走。
Giving anything publicly in terms of concessions to Hamas is difficult, but I think this is mounting the pressure on him domestically as well. He was under pressure before the war. Increasingly now, you're seeing accusations in Israeli media and beyond that he's putting his own political survival ahead of the interests of the country now.
这已不是以哈之间的恩怨，而是纳坦雅胡代表的鹰派能否继续执政。想就国内支持率，恐怕还得彻底停火。CNN 报道，开战后，总理纳坦雅胡的民调已低到无法继续掌权，因为这场冲突已让上千个以色列家庭失去宝贝孩子。还有年轻以色列女性被俘虏，遭不人道对待。
לא הולמים בגדים של בובות והפכו את הילדות האלו לבובות שלהם, בובות על חוט שאפשר לעשות איתם מה שרוצים, מתי שרוצים.
坚持不止战，以色列政府持续加派战车进驻，故意破坏非军事区域的加萨人民亡者墓园，种种行径让以色列渐渐失去国际组织支持。
We deplore today's attack on the UN's Khan Yunis Training Center.
Israel's occupation must end. A lasting end to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict can only come through a two-state solution.
I think
话才刚说出口，世界卫生组织秘书长谭德赛一度停顿超过10秒，说不下去。
if we look for a solution, it's always possible. People are facing death or risk of death because of hunger and starvation and famine. If you add all that, I think it's not easy to understand how hellish the situation is.
失去国际支持，国内民众上街要求改选的声浪也越来越大。纳坦雅胡这次强硬开战，战线拖得越久，民众损失就越多。一旦失去国内外支持，纳坦雅胡的政治前途恐怕只会更加不明朗。
联合国的人道救援机构 UNRWA 是帮助巴勒斯坦难民的重要组织，却被以色列指控旗下的员工暗中协助 Hamas， 还参与了10月7号的攻击行动，消息震惊全球。更让人惊讶的是 ，UNRWA 把许多援助金都投入教育，资助的是近30万名的学生，却被发现了教科书的内容鼓吹暴力、美化圣战士，还有自杀攻击，甚至还妖魔化以色列，推广反犹太主义。这违反了联合国相关的国际组织应该避免卷入国际冲突、保持中立的原则。
以色列人手持抗议标语，挥舞国旗，他们占据通往加萨的克瑞沙洛关卡，要哈马斯释放人质，否则不惜阻止人道救援。
Hundreds of thousands of starving people in there. The responsible about the Palestinians, kids and families is on Hamas.
民众怒呛哈马斯才是元凶，以色列政府则指控人道救援机构是恐怖攻击的共犯结构。
Accusations by Israel that a handful of UNRWA workers were involved in the October 7th attack. Israel has not publicly released its evidence. UNRWA fired the accused staffers and launched an investigation into the allegations.
联合国近东巴勒斯坦难民救济工作署 UNRWA 爆出工作人员竟然参与突袭以色列的攻击行动，消息震惊全世界，因为 UNRWA 的最大金主就是最挺以色列的欧美国家。
Yeah, we have suspended any outlying or yet to be allocated funds for UNRWA, the UN Relief and Works Agency.
发现联合国是哈马斯的帮凶，包括美、英、加、德、意和和瑞士、芬兰、澳洲等9国立刻宣布暂停金援。随后，法国、日本、奥地利和纽西兰等国家也宣布跟进。
Any employee of UNRWA who is involved in acts of terror will be held accountable, including through criminal prosecution.
东窗事发之后，联合国秘书长古特瑞斯下令展开调查。UNRWA 负责人拉扎里尼更紧急开除12名涉嫌员工，更向国际喊话：若资金断炊，将严重打击仰赖援助为生的200多万人，呼吁各国继续捐款支持。
UNRWA suffers from chronic underfunding, which impacts the quality of our services. upholding refugees' rights is not only the responsibility of humanitarian and development actors, it is a responsibility shared with donors and host countries.
UNRWA 反过来批评，因为部分人的罪行制裁整个机构和服务的社群，非常不负责任。
The countries that have announced this suspension, their aid amounts to 70% of the annual budget of the United Nations Relief and Work Agency. This measure is extremely dangerous, and it is our hope that it will be reversed.
巴勒斯坦政府强调 ，UNRWA 是难民的生命线。话锋一转，指责以色列在打压援助机构，是要将巴勒斯坦人赶出加萨。1948年以阿战争爆发之后，以色列独立建国，却是巴勒斯坦的大灾难。为了照顾大量的难民，联合国成立近东巴勒斯坦难民救济工作署，帮助当地的难民维持生计，援助了4代的巴勒斯坦难民。
And no one else can play the role that UNRWA's been playing. Certainly not in the near term. No one has the reach, the capacity, the structure to do what UNRWA's been doing.
الدول كل الغرب قاعدين واقفين ضدنا هنا في قطاع غزة، هذه مؤامرة، هذا حكم علينا بالإعدام. يعني إذا وقفت الوكالة عنا في قطاع غزة حنموت حنتجوع في الشوارع، يعني هيك إحنا جعانين.
该机构将难民定义为1948年之后失去家园和生计的人。由于以色列拒绝让流离失所的巴勒斯坦人返乡，难民竟然高达590万人。
Every UN body has become weaponized against the Jewish state, exploited as an instrument to aid in the elimination of my people.
不过，以色列也多次批评 UNRWA 操作难民议题，不断要求各国捐款，结果却拿钱去资助激进组织。哈马斯发动的袭击，不论武器装备或是后勤资源，都需要钱。以色列的媒体爆料列出哈马斯的年度预算，竟然还有13%，大约3.25亿美元来自联合国。而且哈马斯也会玩虚拟货币。
Investigators in the U.S. and around the world have identified a revenue source being exploited by Hamas, online donors offering support in cryptocurrency.
调查指出，哈马斯2019年使用虚拟货币在社群网络上募集的捐款一度高达4100万美元。由于加密货币不受任何中央银行监管，可以快速转移资金，比银行转账还更难追踪，连知名交易所也沦为哈马斯的小金库。
Exchange the world.
由于币安的平台放任恐怖组织与犯罪分子洗钱、转移资金和不法所得，被美国政府指控违反洗钱和制裁规定，重罚了43亿美元。执行长赵长鹏也只好认罪下台。
And its platform accommodated criminals across the world who used Binance to move their stolen funds and other criminal proceeds.
另外，曾经和股神巴菲特共进午餐的中国企业家孙宇晨，他创立的虚拟货币波场遭到以色列和美国锁定，点名该区块链帮助恐怖分子集资，交易快和成本低的特色也让波场较比特币更受欢迎。如今不止私人企业，就连国际组织公信力有时候也会备受质疑。
On January 14th, China is still telling the WHO they have not seen human-to-human transmission. That day, the WHO echoes China's message.
祸害全世界3年的新冠病毒疫情，2019年底就被人在中国武汉发现，但是世界卫生组织采信中国的说法，直到2020年1月才宣布全球大流行。
I'm declaring a public health emergency of international concern.
由于世卫低估事态严重性，造成疫情快速蔓延，世卫更被指责在替中国隐匿疫情。美国川普政府还一度切断金援，宣布退出组织。
More than ever, we need global solidarity. We need the United Nations. And the United Nations needs you, your energy, creativity, courage, and commitment. Together, I know we have what it takes to solve our shared challenges.
联合国象征的国际主义，致力维护世界和平、发展普世人权，促进经济社会文化交流。但是国际组织的公正性如果受到质疑，影响力恐怕会一落千丈。
全球 WhatsApp 统计显示，农历春节台湾人出国首选城市也是日本东京。到日本当然就不能够错过美食了。近期有业者推出东京拉面之旅行程安排，参加的游客要挑战在3个小时内吃遍6碗不同风味的拉面，大受欢迎。而这样的极限拉面之旅，团费大约是1万日元，相当于新台币2100元。唯一让人担心的是胃容量不够。感谢您加入今天的国际辩论社，我是刘晨曦，我们下周再会。